Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about Instagram tips to get your Instagram looking super consistent and how to dial in that theme. Roll the intro. Hey guys, welcome to 2021. If you're new to the account, then welcome. Great to have you here. Hopefully you like the content and you get some value out of it. But I'm going to start kicking off the year by talking about how to dial in your Instagram theme and your sort of consistency within your work online. So what I'm going to do is talk about a few different sort of pointers to consider when thinking about your Instagram theme, but then I'm also going to show a few different accounts in which I follow and really like on Instagram and actually what they do to help with consistency within their work. A few things that you need to keep in mind and things that you need to ask yourself when it comes to creating an Instagram theme. The first thing to ask is, what sort of photography do you like to shoot? Is it just landscapes? Do you like doing portrait photography, products? Do you like doing a variety of different types of photography and you want to upload a real mixture of different types of shots? So what I typically say with that is that, if you do only shoot one specific type of work, whether it's landscapes, for example, that will help with creating your sort of consistency within your Instagram feed, because people will eventually start recognizing you and your work because you do really amazing landscapes, for example. But if you like to upload a real variety of different things, there are ways in which you can create consistency within your feed that will still allow you to kind of do a variety of different work. Another thing to consider is your color palette. So your color palette, I think, for me personally, is one of the really, really important things to create your Instagram theme. Regardless of the type of photography that you do, having a really consistent color palette or sort of editing style will really, really help dial in your sort of theme, so it's really nice and sort of aesthetic as you're scrolling down your feed. And ultimately, it will make your shots more recognizable because you have a unique sort of editing style. So another thing to consider is your lighting. If you've got really mixed lighting across your Instagram feed, it can look really jarring and can be very difficult to try and follow along. Typically, you need to think about how you're shooting a particular shot and is the lighting very consistent with the rest of your shots that you're taking. That can be easier said than done, but I think that there are ways to work that to your advantage. Typically, if you like really contrasty images, then you'll edge towards that and you'll kind of have sort of a real sort of harsh difference in your sort of highlights and your shadows. Or if you like sort of really bright and vibrant shots, then you can kind of work that to your advantage. It all depends on, the style in which you like to create. Another thing that I think is kind of quite missed a lot in Instagram is actually the sort of breathing space that you have in your work. I think I see a lot of Instagram feeds where they have a real mixture of like really busy shots, whether it's like in woodlands, for example, and it's really busy because you've got leaves everywhere, or you have really minimalistic type shots where it's just like a person on like a really blank wall or something. And I think having a real mix of that can be a bit of a weird thing to look at when scrolling through an Instagram feed. So I think it's just a case of balancing that out and making sure that as you're scrolling through a feed, it's quite consistent in terms of the actual sort of breathing space that you have in your shots. And then there are other things, do you have the sort of like really recognizable sort of patterns or points of interest in your shots, depending on how you compose your shots, etc. There are a variety of different things, and a combination of all of those sort of points will be able to help you create and dial in your consistency within your Instagram feed. So I just want to talk about a few different accounts and how they kind of create some more consistency within their feed. So if we start off with my account, for example, I think that my account, I typically try and create a lot of consistency with the way I edit my shots and the lighting. Those are the sort of two key points in which I try and focus on most. Typically, I upload a lot of landscape and sort of cityscape type shots. I think a lot of my followers follow me based off of my sort of landscape stuff, but I like to be able to try and mix in different types of shots like flat lays, for example. I like kind of putting them in every now and then. I do a lot of like portrait work, but I don't actually upload any of that onto my Instagram feed because I've not really found a very good way of being able to bring that in easily. There are ways of doing that, but I think you just need to put in a lot of the effort to actually get it to work. I just personally haven't done that. But in my sort of color palette, I like to kind of stick to sort of a greeny blue sort of shadows, and then really nice and warm highlights, and sort of, well, and midtones, I should say. And so kind of really pulling in the sort of oranges, yellows and reds in the sort of midtones and highlights. And I think with that, actually, it's really easy to dial in consistent theme just with that sort of color palette alone. But then another thing that you do have to consider is actually how you light your shots. I used to go for really punchy, contrasty shots, and I've kind of slowly dialed that down, but I do try and bring in that sort of contrast with the sort of highlights and shadows. I like to kind of bring the shadows down a little bit, just so I've got that sort of nice deep look to some of my shots. So as you look through my feed, what you'll notice is that obviously, you know, I have a lot of landscapey stuff, but where I do have flat lay stuff, for example, it is still really consistent tone-wise because of the way I edit and the way I like to do my lighting. So at least that way it stays consistent, and I can upload shots that are varied every now and then. But yeah, the majority of my consistency is within my edit and my lighting, and I probably say that most people would say that it's to do with the fact I upload a lot of landscape stuff as well. One other guy which does a real variety of different types of shots is a good friend of mine who's called Dan Flinter. His username is @FlintandSteel. His work is really, really nice. He's got a similar sort of editing style. He likes to kind of pull out a lot of the sort of warm oranges in the sort of midtones and highlights, and kind of getting some nice sort of deep bluey blacks in the shadows. But he typically uploads a real variety of like landscape, portrait and product stuff, and he does a cracking job at how he mixes all of that in. As you kind of scroll down, it's still really consistent because he's getting that really consistent color palette and really consistent lighting within his work. And you'll also notice about some of the points I made in terms of breathing room of each of his shots. So go and check out his feed if you want to just kind of pick out some points about his feed in terms of his consistency. Another account is another good friend called Sam East. His username is @BEARINGEAST. He used to start off by doing a lot of portrait style work, and his portrait stuff was amazing, still is. But I think kind of early stages of the pandemic, he decided to kind of move into more product photography and sort of flat lays. But he's just started kind of doing a load of sort of lifestyle and sort of landscapey stuff as well. But the thing I really like about his feed is that whilst he's kind of got a really consistent sort of color palette, he likes to mix his color palette up across his feed. So it's not super consistent in terms of like every shot has exactly the same colors. He's just got, I'd say, maybe like sort of 5 colors in which he really tries to focus on across each of his shots. So he doesn't have to be super consistent in terms of the types of shots that he does or the colors, but he still manages to dial that in through just the use of similar colors across his whole feed. And one thing that you'll really notice in his work is his sort of level of light and contrast. A lot of his work is really nice and contrasty. He's got some really deep shadows, and it really creates a really moody look across his feed. It's really, really nice. Highly recommend going to check out his feed. He also does some really cool presets, which I downloaded his cinematic presets where he's tried to emulate some really popular films, and like his color use and lighting is just spot on. It's really, really well done. Really highly recommend his presets as well. So I couldn't do this video without giving a shout out to my good buddy Lloyd. His account is Lloyd Evans Photo. Another really great account that it just really dials in the consistency really well. He typically focuses on landscape and lifestyle stuff, which really helps with the consistency in terms of the types of shots. But if you look at his editing style, he really focuses in on the sort of bluey brown tones across his shots, and it creates a really nice sort of moody look across his feed, especially as it's kind of coming into the winter. It's a really nice way of being able to kind of pull out some of that sort of moody winter details across his feed. And you're going to notice across, you know, whether it's his sort of landscape or whether it's his lifestyle stuff, it's still super consistent. And like me, he used to go super punchy in terms of his contrast, you know, years ago, but he's dialed that back. And whilst he still kind of brings that contrast in with his shadows, it's not as harsh or as punchy anymore. And it's really nice and pleasing to look at because it's always kind of got that nice soft tone, but it still creates that nice lighting within his shots. Also worth kind of mentioning, he used to be a lighting designer for the theatre in Bath, so he understands lighting super well. So if you want to go and message anyone about lighting within shots, and he is the guy, he's really good with it. So in terms of like breathability and, you know, spacing of your shots in terms of their composition, is a guy called PINTO. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He followed me ages ago on Instagram, and his work is amazing. Like, he's been super kind and like encouraging and really supportive of my work. He mainly does a lot of architectural based shots, and what you'll notice across his feed is that it's really consistent in terms of how he spaces out his compositions. You'll notice that he is trying to make the most of the frame and trying to fill that with the sort of immense architecture that surrounds him. And, you know, with that, you know, he's got a very consistent way in which he edits his colors as well, which really helps. And because it's a really consistent type of photography that he does, which is very architectural and sort of city based, that also really helps dial in his consistency within his work. But yeah, in terms of like, if scrolling through his feed, actually he makes the most of the frame. So therefore, if he were to upload a really minimalistic type shot, it might look a little bit jarring. So yeah, it's quite interesting in that, looking at his feed in that way. But his work is amazing. Go and check it out. It's really interesting to look at how he does his feed in general. So I've gone through a few different accounts in which I follow, just kind of talking about the ways in which they achieve their sort of consistency within their feed. In terms of how you can try and take that knowledge and try and apply it to your own work, one tip that I would advise is, you know, start off with one preset, whether it's a preset that someone else has made or whether you've made it. Obviously, you kind of want to create your own sort of authentic style, but I think start off with one preset in Lightroom and just apply that to all of your work, and just try and make that work across all of your work. That will kind of help teach you a way of being able to create consistency within either a specific editing style or sort of color palette. It will also kind of help dial in your sort of contrast and lighting, but just try and stick with one preset and just see how you can make it work. If you don't like it, try another one. You know, you kind of got to work a preset to your advantage. So, you know, even if you're just trying to make one, just play around with the colors. What do you like? And just try and work that to your advantage. Doesn't really matter too much in terms of, you know, what type of shots you take. Having one consistent preset will essentially allow you to get that nice consistent edit. Another tip to kind of really focus on is how do you take your shots? Make sure that your lighting is consistent. Make sure that your settings are kind of nicely dialed in. Do you like lots of depth of field? Do you like lots of the shot to be in focus? So just lots of little ways in which how you take your shots will also contribute to your sort of consistency within your work. One tool that I highly recommend for actually sort of being able to see your Instagram feed and plan out your Instagram feed is an app called Preview. There are loads of apps that kind of do this, but this particular one just worked much better to how I wanted to use it. So you can just upload as many shots into it as you want. You can also have it pull in your Instagram feed, so therefore it uses the photos that are already on your feed and allows you to add new photos on top of that to be able to help plan out your feed. Loads of really, really cool other features in there, but I mainly just use it for sort of planning out shots. It just allows you to be able to actually plan out your feed and see how your shots are looking consistent over time. If you, for whatever reason, don't have access to it or can't download it, you can do stuff in Photoshop or you know, some other tool like that. But Preview is what I personally use. I think is a really, really great tool. I'll put a link in the bio so you can download it from the App Store. So I hope that that's actually helped. I didn't want to kind of dive too much in terms of like Lightroom or anything like that in terms of how to edit your shots. I'll kind of come onto that into another video, but I wanted to kind of point out how others actually achieve consistency within their shots and things that you really need to focus on. I think sometimes when people say, oh, you need to have a really consistent theme, I think sometimes people can take that and go completely off the rails with it. And, you know, especially if you're kind of starting out in photography, it's difficult without actually knowing what makes a good theme. Having someone sort of break it down, I think would hopefully sort of be helpful. So if you're sort of new to photography and want to really dial in your Instagram theme, then I really hope this video has helped. If you're new, then I'd love it if you could subscribe. That would be awesome. And, you know, punch the like button and, you know, leave a comment. If you have any questions, then please feel free to leave me a comment or DM me on Instagram. It'd be great to see you there, and it'd be great to chat to you. In the meantime, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.